Hey everyone, welcome to Talking Landscape Photography. Tonight we've got a pretty awesome show, and I'm super excited about this one because I've always wanted to, know more a bit about bioluminescence and also a little bit. I just think it's the most amazing phenomenon. It's nothing like seeing something glow in the dark to bring back, childhood memories of glow in the dark stickers or something like that. So no, it's absolutely awesome to have Fraser Johnston join us, and we'll do an intro with him soon. But first of all, Paul and Nick, what have you guys been doing and been able to get out and do some shooting?
I spent most of them yesterday getting driven in by my printer to a doctor's surgery because I got something in my eye that felt like a razor blade, and I was spending half an hour in the printer's bathroom trying to wash it out and having no luck, and screaming agony. He felt sorry enough for me to ditch his business and drive me all the way to the doctor's surgery. I waited for another hour and got a bunch of dyes chucked in my eye and fluorescent lights and swabs and goopy stuff. And today I'm much better. So, but yesterday I had this David Bowie sort of look going on where one of my eyes went green, which was pretty interesting. Somebody took a few close-up shots of that.
You haven't insured your eye at all,
It's a funny joke. I don't know how that works, but but I went into the Bob Brown Foundation office and started working on some ideas for the upcoming exhibition in June from the work that Lucy and I did out on and Andrew Phipps out on the Tarkine coast with the Aboriginal community and some senior elders, and so that's pretty exciting to see that sort of coming to life so quickly and trying to curate the work a little bit. And I wasn't meant to be here. I'm meant to be flying somewhere over the South Australian desert right now with a couple of very talented photographers. And the pilot pulled the pin because there's a bunch of storms coming through, and a lot of the areas were so remote. We were trying to land on little bush track sort of landing sites that are dirt, and if they're covered in water, they're incredibly dangerous, and you're not really able to land. So we couldn't really get away around it. We tried rejigging it, and we're going to have another meeting to try and pick another date after a few months of planning. And then I've just been poring over Google Earth for the last couple of hours with Scotty McCook, looking at a trip I'm potentially doing in June up to not the tropical Capricorn, the Gulf of Carpentaria, actually, very new area. And so we're just trying to scout out where the air points, where the sort of ideal points are, and what the distances are, and what the reach of the planes are, and where we can maybe land and all that kind of stuff. So I haven't given up. It's been a year since I've done a decent trip out of the States, so I'm getting pretty itchy feet. If anyone knows me, that's probably the longest time of my life. But first world problems, also reflecting a lot on how lucky we are, and sort of this little bubble that we're in down in this part of the world relative to a place like India and other places in the world that have just living a very, very different life than us, like psychologically and otherwise, and just feeling incredibly grateful. It's a bit of a mixed bag week, really, for me.
How about you, Nick? I've seen you've been going out and doing a bit of shooting.
Yeah, I'm sadly coming to the end of my holidays from work in a couple of days, but I've was away last week from the show, and that's because I took the opportunity to go away for another 4 nights. So I've had 2 trips away during this lot of holidays, which I'm very grateful to my family for allowing me to do. Went up to the northeast, back to a favourite patch of forest of mine, which is pretty special. In fact, my background tonight's from that patch of forest in the blue tier.
Awesome background. Makes it look like you've got some angel wings or something, actually. So,
well, they're normally tucked away, but I brought them out tonight. I spent a couple of days up in the northeast. Went to shot some sand dunes up there at St Helens, Perrin Dunes, which I've been eyeing off for a while, and
still never made it.
We had a night. Well, actually, both nights I was there. There was not a cloud in the sky, so I took advantage of direct light and got direct light on the dunes on the second night, which was fun. The only bit that wasn't fun was trying to actually find an undisturbed patch of sand, because there are a lot of people that visit the dunes, both in cars and off-road vehicles and on foot. But I found a nice little patch and just shot some nice patterns, which was nice. And then the following morning, the fog and the mist rolled in, and the rain soon after, and I was back up in the mountains of the Blue Tier shooting the background that I've got, and lots of beautiful old myrtles, which was lovely. And then I took off to back to the Great Western Tiers, which is the second time this set of holidays I've been. So I went to some more waterfalls and got absolutely drenched with rain, but it was fun. It was great.
Yeah,
fun.
they're the wettest social media posts I've ever seen with somebody smiling like that, Nick.
Yeah, I
I
posted.
hope you're making a point of smiling even bigger on the even wetter day that you're out.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I emerged from the Blue Tier and took a picture of how wet I was, and then the next day or the day after, took a picture of even wetter in the Western Tiers.
Right. That raincoat didn't look super waterproof, mate. It looked like it got all the way through by then.
Yeah, it's a lovely Mont Gore-Tex jacket, but as you know, all Gore-Tex jackets do wet out if they have enough water on them. And the problem wasn't just the rain; it was all the vegetation that you're pushing past. I actually wore gumboots for the first time. I'm normally a leather boots and gaiters person, but
once you go to the gumboots, you can't go back. I reckon that's too good.
Yeah, I've always had cheap gumboots, and I've never enjoyed them at all. They've been horrible to do any walking in, but for some reason I wasn't really aware that you could get decent, good quality gumboots that are actually very nice for walking in. So I got myself a pair of Otway boots, which are an Australian brand manufactured in Victoria. They're very similar for those that know their gumboots, I suppose. Having looked into it, you can get a brand called Bog Boots, and there's another brand called Muck Boots, I think, and they're both North American brands, I think. But these Otway boots are absolutely top-notch quality and just so comfortable.
They're about 160, 170 bucks, Nick?
Yeah, think about I got the sort of the top of the range long model.
You want to get the long ones because if you get anything with a handle or short ones, you'll end up getting water in them, and then it defeats the purpose.
Yeah, but I was super impressed. I think they're 160 or 170 bucks online, and I got mine from a local store in Hobart, Allwoods, and they were 20 bucks more expensive. But
the thing I like about what I like about walking in boots like that is that you can actually walk still straight down the track. Otherwise, if you're wearing hiking boots, you're always tempted to walk on the edges and further erode the track. But because you've got boots on, it doesn't matter if you walk right down the middle. So I think it's actually a really good thing in terms of keeping the tracks, not braided and that kind of thing. So
yeah, that's exactly right. And I was thinking exactly the same thing as I was squelching through the Blue Tier on the track towards a bit of forest I was heading to. It was very wet, so it was great to have them on. In fact, the only part of my body that was dry at the end of both of those wet days were my feet in the boots. And I was standing in creeks.
The other way around.
Yeah.
Did you manage to dodge the groin leeches, or you're
No groin leeches on this occasion. I did get one leech bite on the back of my neck in the Western Tiers, but I spotted it, or I felt it straight away, so I ripped it off, and there was no blood, but I still got the big mozzie bite, itchy thing on the back of my neck. But it wasn't like the Tarkine a couple of weeks ago where I was very wary of the leeches, which were super hungry, and no groin leeches, thankfully.
Well, that's very handy.
Yeah. But no, I'm a little bit depressed about the fact I have to go back to work after spending some really good quality time in the bush. But that's life, and you got to pay your bills, and you got to look after your family, and so back to reality now.
Well, I forgot to mention the reason why I wasn't on the show last week was exactly kind of the antithesis to Nick. Is I was working, but I was doing what I absolutely loved, and I couldn't believe I was getting paid for it. I was running an art therapy camp with a whole group of young people out on the Tarkine coast, down the Pyman River, and on the ferry, and I had some of the best conditions that I've ever had out there in 20 years to shoot, and it was my job to shoot and teach the kids how to shoot and sort of relate to country through art and through photography and on a deeper sort of level. And it was just so satisfying on so many different levels. And I wasn't expecting to shoot that much, but it just tied in quite well. And a lot of the kids wanted to stay out late and do a sunset at Rupert Point and walk back in the dark. And I was like, well, fine by me. And then it just happened to be epic sunset. And I was like, we're all around there together, just shooting at the same time. And I loaned one of my big cameras to them and just sort of stuff it. It's just sitting on my rack. And they were just really into it and did some beautiful work of their own. So I got a real mixture of portraits and environmental portraits and people on country, as well as some traditional landscapes that might actually end up in the exhibition in June as well. So sorry to miss that show. That was, I don't know, it's the first one I've missed, second in a year. Like, I've done pretty well.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Not many, but I was definitely doing what I loved and getting paid for it. So that was magnificent.
It's always good. It's just it might be a little bit less regular, the pay that you get, and maybe not quite as much as if you're on a salary, but you got to make these sacrifices.
It's one of those weeks where I was ticking all the boxes at the same time, just pinching my bum. I did have the trip home wasn't quite as fun because I was literally getting home at 10 at night and off at 4 o'clock in the morning to the airport on this trip, and the email I got saying, oh, by the way, the trip's been cancelled. And I had a couple of hours to try and cancel all my flights, and that were obviously less than 24 hours away, and come up with plan B. And so that was a slight antithesis to the end, but yeah, I'm still buzzing from that trip, and I really, really love the work I got from it, actually. So I'm looking forward to sharing that.
Good stuff, Paul. And I haven't been shooting much because I've been moving house, so that's been enthralling.
Setting up a Sony lens display behind that you now see behind.
Look
at that! Look at that!
Beautiful. Yeah, so but I'm actually running from my laptop tonight, so I'll have the proper setup going next week. But that's
it's like $20,000 worth of boxes up there, Lucky.
Yes, again. Anywho, we're here to talk about bioluminescence, not about our incredibly boring lives. So yes, Fraser, thank you so much for joining us. I've known Fraser for a few years, and he's an extremely talented filmmaker, and just knows how to get some pretty amazing shots, and really pushes himself, I think, to get content and footage that really is quite unique. And if you get a chance, it's well worth going. I think you've got a Vimeo, don't you, Fraser?
Yeah, it's probably not updated as much.
Yeah, but you've got a short to Tartarus, or like, no, what's the cave one that you've got?
The Push Day film, yeah.
Yes, Push
film,
Day.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic. I really highly recommend to watch that, because it really shows you the level that Fraser goes to get the footage that he gets, and it's really quite astounding. I mean, how deep down are you in those caves? I mean, you must be in some of the deepest caves in Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, so that was shot in the deepest cave in Australia. So I think it's just shy of 400 meters. So it's like, on a world scale, it's not hugely deep, but I think the deepest in the world is something like almost 2 kilometers deep.
Wow.
But it's pretty gnarly. It's lots of abseiling and climbing and that kind of thing. So it's definitely, I haven't done any caving like that for a long time, like since maybe about 2 years or a year and a half. But yeah, it's definitely one of the scariest things I've ever done. So there was 4 years of that. So luckily the glowworms that we'll talk about aren't anywhere near as that depth in the cave.
Yeah, well, that's very handy. So you mentioned you're not really doing the caving stuff so much anymore. Is just interested to know if you can talk about it, what you're working on at the moment.
I've actually, funnily enough, I'm sort of in the first stages of talking about another glowworm shoot. So that's kind of
fun. Right, cool.
Yeah. So that's funny. Those sorts of things seem to come around every year or so. So it's always nice to go back and have a look at that. I don't know if it'll pan out or not yet. With natural history in particular, there's lots of things that change over time, and often you're on quite tight budgets and trying to capture quite a lot of material. It's to build a sequence, but hopefully it works out, and I can go back and spend some time in the caves looking at glowworms and that kind of thing, because it's quite with time lapse, each shot, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Each shot that might only be a few seconds on TV actually takes hours to shoot and set up for. So
I was going to ask about that, actually, what the ratio might be.
It depends. Yeah, it changes, but it means that if you want, like with the caves, that you get everything set up and off you go. And unfortunately, like if it messes up halfway through, it starts dropping frames, or it like goes out of sync with the slider because you want some camera movement and things. It's like a whole day shot pretty much. You have to, for like one shot. So it takes a long time. But anyway, it also gives you some nice time to reflect and just hang out in these kind of places. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it might as well sort of mention what we were discussing before the show in terms of what we'll talk about tonight. There's actually, and I think I had it in the show notes too, there's 3 kinds of bioluminescence that Fraser's shot. The sea sparkle, which is Noctiluca, is it?
Yeah, Noctiluca scintillans.
Yeah, it's a plankton, isn't it? Or
so
dinoflagellate?
That's right. It's a phytoplankton, and it's a tiny little round ball like this. I might have some. No, I don't actually have any downloaded. Some under the microscope.
Oh, wow.
So it looks like a little sac, just like a little grape or something like that. Under the microscope, and it's quite an interesting little thing. It's something that's quite common in Tassie. I've sort of been seeing it since I was a little kid. So
you don't think the incidence of it might be increasing, or like there's some thought that it might be related to some fish farming perhaps, and extra nutrients in the water?
It's hard to say. I wouldn't like to comment on that. I've noticed that it seems to be it was never there when I was really young. I started noticing it probably when I was 17, 18, and there's no coincidence that coincided in me walking home late at night, from being at the pub or something like that. And so my parents used to live in Sandy Bay, so I'd walk along Sandy Bay Road to get home usually from Club Surreal. I don't know if Nick might pull that.
I remember Club Surreal, don't
worry. So after a big night there, I'd be walking home, and along that waterfront there, I noticed some, I just noticed the glow in the water, and it was something that was really quite crazy. And so I think a couple of times I even went swimming, like when it was really really strong. So but it was never like we saw in 2015, which is when we shot that Stuff for Life That Glows. That was really, really strong. I never saw it like that. That was, it's always sort of been there, but not like a huge thick bloom that I can remember. But cameras are now ubiquitous when they weren't always. So I do wonder whether the people seeing it more or recording it and documenting it more is because of that.
Yeah, well, it could be because now the technology with cameras is caught up for low light photography, because it is quite challenging to capture if you don't know how to set your camera for low light. And then there's more footage of it going out, so then more people are looking for it, and then the more you see, the more you think that there's out there. But there does seem to be certain areas where it always tends to congregate, and you do tend to find that there's, I guess, hotspots for where it is, certainly in Tassie. And I think also in Jervis Bay up in New South Wales is pretty common, and maybe a few other spots up there as well. So it's always a cool thing to see. I actually was lucky enough to see it really, really well. Not probably in the level that we'll see in your footage coming up, but it was like the whole, you could step and it was like almost like you could read a newspaper to how bright the light coming off it actually was. It was quite special. So so, and then the other 2 things we'll talk about tonight is also the glowworms and also ghost fungi. We'll probably go ghost fungi then glowworms after that. So there's actually quite a bit to cover there when you think about it. But I guess we'll talk more about. Have you ever shot the bioluminescence, Nick? The sea sparkle?
Yeah, a couple of times. Yep. I've seen it many more times than I've actually bothered shooting it. It sometimes gathers in some fairly dingy sort of bays that are worth taking the family to go and have a look at, but not so much worth shooting. But it's interesting, Fraser talking about his first experience of it. I remember my first experience of it pretty clearly. We were on a camp at school camp at Cook's Beach at Fraser, grade 10. So it was an outdoor education camp, and we'd walked into Cook's Beach, and it was there in the waves on Cook's Beach one of the nights that we were there. And so we all got in and went for a swim in it. It was fantastic. And we didn't know anything about it. We'd never heard of it. It was just suddenly the water was glowing. And so we all decided to go for a swim, and it was all in our hair. And it was a pretty magical experience, especially on a beach like Cook's Beach, which is a pretty nice beach. So it was a great experience. But yeah, I don't get quite as excited about bioluminescence as maybe I should. It's got to be in the right context for me. I've shot it with an aurora down on the Tasman Peninsula, which was pretty cool. And I managed to get accidentally get some bioluminescence with some lightning. Also on the Tasman Peninsula, I was chasing a lightning storm, and I was about to give up and go home, and then I thought, no, I'll quickly duck down to the Tesla pavement. And so I was very lucky when I got there that the waves were all glowing. So I set up the camera and managed to capture some lightning as well as the bioluminescence in the waves, which was pretty nice. And I think everything after that it feels a bit more mundane once you get those two together. So yeah, it was But I've shot it a few times, but not quite as excited as some people get about it.
I think one of the things with the Noctiluca, which is different to the ghost fungi and the glowworms, is that it needs to be kind of agitated in order to get the actual color to show. And so I think Fraser's footage will show that really well. Maybe Fraser, we could maybe see a few clips that you have
sure.
there, and just show the viewers
sure.
Pretty cool stuff there.
I definitely agree with Nick as well about it's sort of contextual, isn't it? There's a big difference between seeing it like you did down at the tessellated pavements to like chucking a few rocks down at Flippers, and it's quite Cook's Beach. That's amazing. That would have been magical.
It's certainly it's a bit like auroras too, in a way. Like it's one thing to capture a nice phenomenon like that, but it's another thing entirely to put it in a nice photograph. And it should be a great photograph, probably without the bio there to start with, if and then the bio is kind of like the icing on the cake. So
I remember going chasing for it with Lukey actually, and we'd seen all these incredible photos the night before, like all around Fraser. It was like unbelievable, and then we got up there and just didn't get a single thing. Like we were in the same places. It was like, and we realized that the night before was windy as all hell, so it was just agitating the water hugely to get that sort of effect just about everywhere. And it was so still on the night we were there. It was just absolutely nothing. And there was bus loads of people and Chinese tourists that had come up especially to try and find it. And it was like, let's just do an astro shoot, boys.
Yeah, it's amazing how it can sort of disappear as quickly as it comes, and it depends on what way the wind's blowing and the tides and swell probably as well, and all sorts of factors. So it does make it a phenomenon similar to aurora in a way, where it is quite kind of ephemeral that way, and you have to sometimes be in the right place at the right time to actually be able to capture it.
Do you guys want to see this now? I'll just
we can see that. Yeah,
you can see that, all right. Cool. I'm just going to fast forward a bit. It's interesting. I can, if you like, I can break down this sequence because this is all shot completely out of sequence.
Yeah.
If that's something that's interesting to you guys,
Yeah,
just
please.
about the technical stuff before. I'll show you some agitation though. So we, there we go. So the first night we saw it, my good friend Ian Stewart, who you guys would know, he posted a very small clip on Facebook of a fish swimming through this, and I was suffering from insomnia at the time, so I think it was quite late at night, and I texted him and said, "Is this now?" And Ian said, "Yeah, it was," and said, "All right, well, let's go back down." So we did, and it was like this, completely unplanned sort of experience. It was really, really great. I ended up stripping off and running through the water, as you'll see in a second. With a big hole in my underpants, not realizing that this footage was actually seen by millions of people. So yeah, you can. So it was one of those spontaneous moments of just fun, I guess. So you can see that here. Yeah, not far from Hobart. So you can see, that's sort of your more typical stuff. Oh, now we're onto caves. Yeah, so
I rode my bike through Cornelian Bay to get shots like that.
Oh, did you? How'd you go?
It wasn't some crappy bike from the tip shop, and this poor old bike hasn't quite been the same ever since.
I can imagine. We tried to do that again on a second occasion, and the bike was just knackered. It was saltwater and bikes do not mix well.
Not a good mix.
Yeah.
Makes for great footage, though.
Yeah, well,
I love the one with the dog, seeing it around its muzzle. And
the funny thing about this dog is it actually took off after this. Like it just took off into the bush, chasing a wallaby or something, and you could see it for miles because it had all this glowing stuff on its paws and face. And so, the owners knew where it was the entire time as it ran around, trying to get it back. All this is from Life That Glows, which that first night, this one. So that it was sort of before we'd been in touch with any producers who we knew were interested in this kind of thing or anything like that. From there we sent this footage off. And there was a lot of interest. There was this film was in production at the time, and they hadn't managed to get a big bloom like this. And they were sort of going, okay, well, do we send a crew down? Is it going to be around, in 3 days or whatever it would take them to get here, or will it be gone? And I sort of said, well, I don't know, but I can go out and shoot for you. So, we started doing that. So the next week or so was just chasing this big bloom of, not to look around, shooting different aspects for a sequence.
And you play the one too that you had where it was just sort of lapping at the shore as well. That looked pretty awesome. Yeah.
So this stuff here, this stuff's actually the tidal front. So it's you guys will know where it is. It's on a big mud flat, and so this was really I hadn't actually worked out at the time how it worked. And so I knew where to find it, but I didn't know when it would be there. And I'd been hunting around all night. I think I'd been out to Park Beach looking, and there was a little bit in the waves out there, and I'd been to various other places. And I hadn't really found anything. And then I came back to this spot and noticed the tide was coming in, and it was this huge tidal front. We're working with Ammonite, they wanted, a story. You can't just show footage of this stuff without some sort of narrative to it, some kind of context. So the bird shot, I think I shot on the same night as the tidal front, and that's kind of, it sort of starts to tell the story. And I sort of told them about what was happening. I sort of told them about how the tide came in and brought all this with it. And if you look here, where is it? On this shot, right? So I don't know if you can see the cursor. Let's go back. You can see that more footage of birds doing that. I probably would have stayed a hell of a lot longer shooting, but I only stayed there for maybe half an hour with the birds.
I'm really interested too. I don't know if you can talk too much about it, but about the technical side of getting that kind of footage, and maybe like ISOs and
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
really fast glass or something like that.
So yeah, there's a little bit I can say about that. So interestingly, at the time, this happened, only a couple of months after the first A7S came out, and I had one, and so it was kind of the perfect thing to shoot with this camera. And you guys all know how.
And for the audience, that's a Sony low light 12 megapixel sort of camera design, more for video. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's it. And I think at the time it was quite a big breakthrough, particularly that low light, ability of the camera. A few months earlier, it probably wouldn't have been possible to capture this kind of footage. So yeah, we're using that just just because it was available. The other thing, I was quite early on, I guess, in my career. This is 2015. So I didn't have a lot of high-end gear yet, but what we were doing at the time, so these shots here, you can see they're a bit soft, and there's a couple of other shots. I mean, this one's a little bit soft as well. But the lenses I was using were actually lenses I got from the tip shop for like a couple of bucks. But it was before this, now there's quite a big market in vintage lenses. And so I think what I shot these birds on was like a I don't know, like a 2.8 or something like that, 90 millimeter or even faster, maybe 1.8. Anyway, I was getting these insanely fast lenses from the tip shop and using those for a lot of stuff. Now, I probably would never do that now, but at the time I didn't really have a lot of choice. And, it turned out, to be not such a bad option. There's a little bit of distortion in there. Like I'd like it to be a little bit crisper, but, you sort of have to use what you've got sometimes.
Yeah, well, I think you've done extremely well, given I guess by today's terms, that's quite a bit older gear, and so it just goes to show that it's not always about the gear; it's about the skill and getting out there. And I think having a high ISO, you must have been pushing the ISO pretty high.
Oh yeah, so 40,000, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
wow.
Which is
wow.
Yeah, so that's but the other advantage of that camera is you could shoot in log with it. So for video, shooting in log gives you a lot of room to manipulate the image.
How do you describe that to people that don't understand what log is, Fraser?
Yeah, so log is a format that preserves the details in the highlights and the shadows. Mm-hmm. So when it comes out, it looks very muddy, and it's designed to be color graded afterwards. So it's basically gives you more range, more dynamic range. So I can't remember how many stops of dynamic range this camera has, but at the time it was quite good. I think it still probably would hold up under certain circumstances.
Definitely,
particularly for things like time lapse. I think it should probably still be all right with that. But the resolution now is quite a lot better in more modern cameras. But I love that camera. It gave me a really big break. So I owe it a lot.
And you would have taken that down into the caves a bit as well, and some of the other, because it almost a bit like a low light specialist when you think about some of the shoots that you've been doing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So that camera, I've still got it, and you should see it. It is completely wrecked. Still works. But it's covered in mud. The sensor's got heaps of dust behind it. It's
had a hard life.
It has had a very hard life. Yeah. It's been abused quite thoroughly. But so these shots at the start, just going back to the sequencing for a second, these are all shot after we sort of constructed this little story and then went out and shot this stuff to match it. So, I mean, people probably recognize where that is. And you can see these little birds. So, we sort of wanted to show the sun going down, and, you can see the tides actually in here. So, and then this beautiful shot from Ian, which is one of his time lapses of I think that's Wedge in there.
Yeah, Wedge Island.
Yeah, no, that's Betsy Island.
Island.
Was it Betsy? Sorry.
Beaches Wedge, yeah. Or the Surf Breaks Wedge.
Hooking up mobile phone internet inside the cave, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
Elaborate on that, Fraser.
Oh, he's an electrical engineer, so he tends to engineer when he can engineer, and he engineered us Wi-Fi in this cave. So that was I didn't use it very much, but I think he did. So that was good. We could keep an eye on the tennis and things like that. So
yeah, I mean, because we'll get round to the story of that glowworm footage, I suppose. But you spent quite a few days in there, I think, or a few days.
Yeah. It's actually thinking about it, like from a safety perspective, having Wi-Fi in there is probably not a bad idea. If their roof caved in or something, and we could manage to get on our phones and let people know, it'd be very useful.
And it's actually a significant distance to get mobile phone coverage from the trackhead, I think. I mean, he's done very well to get coverage in there.
Oh, absolutely. If whenever you're there, you have to walk right out, and even then the reception isn't great once you get out. So, it's probably was actually quite a good thing.
Which cave was it again?
It was one down south around Ida Bay area.
Oh, down that far. Yeah.
So it's quite a way. Yeah. So anyway, not to look.
And so in terms of the sea sparkle, like you haven't really seen it to that level again. So it sort of shows how it's a bit like auroras too, or other phenomena where you tend to get one that is amazing, and then you're hoping every other one's as good, but never quite gets there.
Yeah, that was a special one for sure. I have seen it. The little beach at the casino. I've seen it in there. And I actually had to shoot some people who wanted some fish. So they were buying a bunch of stock from me. I can't remember what show it was for, but so that footage was then going to be used in this TV show, and they wanted fish swimming through it. And it's like, oh man, that's going to be a pretty tall ask. Like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. So I thought one of the, I was just driving to my parents' place, and I saw this big bloom of not the Luca, and I was like, oh great, I'll get some, and I'll just like hold it so if the tide goes out, it just doesn't disappear, and I'll come back here later and I'll pour it back in, and hopefully, like if I pour it around some rocks or something, there'll be some little animals in there and they'll come out and swim through it. And anyway, so I got a garbage bin and filled this thing up, and so the Not the Luca, it floats on the surface. So I just sort of siphoned it into this massive garbage bin, and just like took it home. I was like, okay, I'll just keep it nice and cool because it was quite a warm day. And then I'll take it back down. I'm not actually sure if you're even allowed to do that. Maybe I should check. But anyway, it never got back into the ocean because I tried to make it glow. Like when it got dark, I sort of put something in it and swished it around, and it just didn't glow. So I don't know what happened, but it didn't work quite.
Maybe it needs all its friends.
So what was that?
Maybe it needs all its friends.
Yeah, it had a lot of friends. That could have been the problem. Maybe it needed some more air or something. I'm not sure, but maybe possibly. I don't think it's very high up on the food chain though, Nick. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of stuff out there that's eating it. But yeah, anyway, it didn't smell really great either. So yeah.
But you obviously collected that during the day because you recognised the bloom. Just maybe tell the folks watching what you can see of it during the day.
Yeah, so during the day, it's definitely not as magical as it is at night. It looks like a pink slime, like a pink scum on the surface. And it's sort of, you see it often in wind veins, like blowing across the surface, like you would with when you see sea foam or other planktonic blooms. But it's a sort of definite pink color. And I have collected it in a bottle before, and you can shake it and it'll glow, and it'll be like that for days. So it's quite cool. I've heard stories that Japanese sailors supposedly used to collect it and use it to read maps and things in in wartime when they had to keep the ship's lights down. So it's kind of it's an interesting stuff. Yeah.
And have you ever seen it like I've seen some amazing footage of like dolphins swimming through it and things like that?
Everyone asks for dolphins.
Yeah.
Everyone wants charismatic megafauna swimming through it. You get me some whales swimming through it? Yeah, okay, sure. I did actually, someone did ask for that once. And I told them what we'd need to. I said, yeah, look, it probably happens, but we'll probably need like a spotter plane that goes out actually maybe Paul could do that next time someone asks for it, to find out where the blooms are and if they're going to be around seal colonies and things like that. So it's not impossible, but I think things like that, I know the footage, that dolphin footage, I think there's two lots of dolphin footage that I've seen, and they were both picked up sort of opportunistically. And that Stuff in Life That Glows, I'm pretty sure that dolphin footage was shot by Martin Dawn, I think. And I'm pretty sure it was probably, one of the whole reasons that series even happened, maybe. If you have footage like that, you need to find a home for it,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess you can always dream.
Yeah, it would be amazing, but I don't know.
It's not that often you're really out on the water like that at night anyway, is it? So
not here, no. Like, I mean, I reckon cray fishermen and abalone divers and stuff have to have stories about it, but yeah, I'm never out in the water in the middle of the night in places where that's likely to happen.
It's not the safest thing to do. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and so in terms of we might move on to the ghost fungi and that sort of thing as well.
Probably more photography as well. The ghost fungi.
Okay, yeah, because I guess I was going to ask around that too. Even with I guess it's relevant to all of them, but I mean, generally you're taking video clips more so, or
it depends what it is. So things like the Not DeLuca, that is pretty bright and in your face, and with a camera that can handle the low light. I mean, you see it shot on iPhones and stuff now. It's really not hard to do. But the ghost fungi are glow a lot less. So you need to find a way of displaying that. And also they're not very, they're not very, they don't move. I mean, they do, but very, very slowly they grow. So you've got to find some way of making those images exciting. And I do that by using a slider or some sort of motion control. And also there are little tricks you can use in post to sort of make things look more animated than they are during the shoot. Ghost fungi are, I guess the main thing about them that I've found anyway is that insects are incredibly attracted to them. So when you're shooting time lapse, that's the thing that becomes, that's the instant thing that you see happening, and you go, okay, first of all, it's glowing. Secondly, it's covered in insects. And then you can take those two things, and that's sort of the point where you can start building a sequence around it or a story around it. And then using the shots on a slider, you kind of add a little bit more dynamic movement. And the other thing is using, shooting like reveals and things like that. So sliding out from behind a log, or there was one shot where I actually shot it out of focus and then shot it in focus, because you can't do a focus pull easily during a time lapse like that. And so, you can go between those two images in post, and it can look like a focus pull from something in the foreground to something in the background, but it's sort of constructed,
Oh, cool. And I guess, given that they don't move all that much, you can also do like a day to night sort of shot as well.
Yeah, well, I haven't tried a day to night with the fungi. I have seen them, and they're pretty cool. I think I did pitch a day to night shot for Night on Earth. So the fungi stuff, we did shoot some things for for life that glows, but there's a Netflix show called Night on Earth, which I think it's Night on Earth. Yeah, in the Jungles episode, it wasn't shot in a jungle, but it's in the jungles.
So the jungles of southern Tasmania.
Yeah, the jungles of Kingston.
So
that so I tried to, but it was, so that whole series takes place at night. I don't think there's any sequences where they go into the daytime, so they never show that period, between nighttime and daytime. So I didn't get to shoot the day to night sequence, but I would like to do that. So hear of anyone looking for one, let me know.
do you have these sequences for us to look at, or?
Yeah, I can show you some.
Yeah.
So this is, I'll just share it. So this is like a kind of rough collection of stuff. It's 18 minutes long, so I won't, I won't make you watch all of it because a lot of it's rubbish. But I'll show you some of it. And if you have any questions about any of the shots, let me know.
I can see all the insects. Wow.
Yeah, there's heaps of them. And I got so wet during this shot. You can see all the rain on it.
Oh.
It was an absolute torrential downpour for about, I don't know, a minute. And I had to, probably about 5 minutes. I had to put the umbrella up and I just got absolutely soaked.
That's actually great. Like you were talking about having movement, and that's exactly what you're getting there.
Yeah. So this is a cool one. Look at the slugs on the right and the millipedes all over it. And you can see the
stars in the back too.
Yeah, moving around. So this is the focus pull. I'm not sure if this is the best example of it that I did. Oh no, that's just out of focus. That's not the focus.
Yeah,
don't worry about that one.
Blind man's focus pull.
Yeah, here you go. So this is cool. Like, again, you see the insects everywhere. This is probably
what sort of aperture are you filming this at?
So like it's really shallow depth of field. So I can't remember what lens I was using, but it'd be like 1.8 or 2 or something like that.
And what's
actually,
I think ISO? You up at that crazy 40,000?
Yeah, so that'd be 40,000 again.
Wow.
And the shot speeds were probably about, what would they have been? Like maybe even like up to a minute, 30 seconds maybe each, possibly.
Oh, each.
I think there's the same bunch of ghost fungi that my friend Ben shot. And
it's the same ones.
The David Malin Awards with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So ghost fungi, and also I've noticed that their glow actually changes throughout you can see the moon or something came out there, but the strength of their glow changes throughout the evening. So here you go. So this is an example of ungraded log. So you saw what these look like, right? So this is shot under similar conditions, but this is with log. This is before it's been graded. So this is log footage, and you can see how muddy that looks. And someone goes past in the background. I had to get rid of them. But you can see.
Is there any pattern to the glow? Like, is it totally different wherever you go with each plant? Or is it kind of like as it gets darker, it glows more? Or what?
I think no, not that I noticed. I couldn't figure that out. As they get older, they definitely dim a bit. So I couldn't find any patterns for why or
So they're older, like are they generally they just last a few months, or are they literally plants that come multiple years?
Like days, like days. I mean the logs you can probably return to and find them fruiting again when they're in season. But the fruit bodies themselves only last a few days. This one
5 days. Oh right.
Yeah, I shot this one first, and then I came back and found these ones, within maybe the same week. But by the time these ones were out, this one was toast. It was just mush. So so that they do have very short, like the fruit bodies don't last long, less than a week maybe, while they're good, because the insects are eating them the whole time as well. So so anyone want an example of log footage, that what it is, but you can see, that here in the highlights, it looks really good. And in most importantly, in the low light, in the shadows, you can see all this stuff here. So, in post, you'd make that a lot darker. You'd make it a lot more contrasting, more colorful. but yeah, it's very useful for this kind of stuff. And there's some more log footage. I mean, that's not great, that shot. This one, this is kind of interesting. The mushroom kind of moves a little bit. It's kind of drying out or something.
Right.
Yeah. What else can I? And I have shot. Oh, there you go. So this is an example of that's the same mushroom that I was saying was shot in log, but this one isn't in log. So you can see the difference, and it would have been the same night, probably the same time actually.
Pretty big.
Yeah, that one's probably, I don't know, like the size of, yeah, I'm not sure. Bit bigger than a phone, I guess. I'm just looking at stuff on my desk.
Only a phone. Yeah, I was thinking it looks kind of as big as a hand or something. But
yeah, probably an outstretched hand. That's probably a good description of it.
And would have that been pitch black when you took that? In terms of you wouldn't been able to see much.
No, you can see the light, like the moon's out by the looks of things. So there is a bit of light, but it's quite hard to see them. I remember the first time I saw one, I was probably about 12 or 13, and I was playing Spotlight up at Denison near Bicheno, and I remember hiding behind this log, and I looked down on the ground, and I thought there was a patch of moonlight on the ground, and I waved my hand over where I thought the moon, light would be coming from to see if I could cover it up, and I couldn't cast a shadow on it, and that's kind of when I realized what it was. So they're not very obvious, it definitely doesn't look like that when you see them out in the forest. They can glow quite brightly, but not nearly. It's not a vibrant, vivid green like these ones.
It'd be almost the same as seeing an aurora, in the sense that if with the night vision, I think I always get it confused. It's either rods or cones, but they have the night vision, and that's why. But they can only do black and white or greys. But so that's why if the ghost fungi weren't super bright, you would see it more as just a white glow rather than the green.
Yeah, right. I didn't know that actually, so that's really interesting.
It'd be probably the same sort of reason behind that. Yeah. Then when you.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, and then when you get the camera, because the camera is more sensitive to light, then you actually get the green color come through. So yeah, right. I'd say that would be it, but I'm not an expert.
I reckon you're probably right, because they don't glow green, they glow kind of white. But they have done. I was reading just the other day actually that there's been some research into. It might be old research. I was reading it the other day. I mean, there's been research into why these fungi glow, and it seems that there are certain insects that are attracted to the particular wavelength that it puts out. So I think it might be something to do with spreading spores, but you can see this one's pretty chewed up. I mean, look at all the ants and stuff on it. They just get absolutely demolished as soon as they pop up. So, and the slugs love them. Just heaps of them everywhere. And not all of this obviously made it into the show, which are a bit grainier and not as good as others, but this is kind of the stuff I had on my hard drive.
I was wondering too, there's a lot of software enhancement programs like the Topaz software and stuff. Is that something that you could even revisit the footage with down the track?
Yeah, I and particularly with that Noctiluca footage, that was shot at a time where it was kind of impossible to shoot it on 4K, and luckily, or any higher resolution. Luckily, it's it's because it's so dark and contrasty, it almost doesn't matter. But it would be nice to sort of be able to upscale that one day, particularly as it's so hard to shoot. Like, I don't know. You couldn't plan doing that. The glowworms and the fungi are a little bit more, they're a little bit easier to predict, whereas the Noctiluca, not, hardly at all. You just kind of have to be lucky.
Would you, I guess, considering that they're not obviously, brightly luminescing if you're just walking past, I guess if anyone wanted to go and find them, then it'd be better to go during the day and work out where they are and come back at night.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you guys would probably follow a lot of the similar groups to what I do, and I often see people asking, is this a is this a ghost fungi? And often they are. I mean, they look kind of like oyster mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
I think if you can identify them and then go back at nighttime, then that's always good. Yeah. And if you can identify them on private property where you're not going to get, lots of people with head torches coming around and having a look, probably even better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you? What was I going? Lost my train of thought. Yeah. What sort of conditions do you? Where have you found them? What sort of conditions are they growing in? They're not all over the place, but.
Yeah, they're not all over. They're sort of often associated with wood. I've seen them. I'm not sure what particular trees that they associate with, but I've definitely seen them on Banksia stumps and fallen Banksia branches. I've seen them coming up out of the ground, but I'm pretty sure they're probably attached to some rotting wood or something that's buried, like some old roots or something like that. And look, I think I've seen photos of them on, I don't know, I've actually seen them on eucalypts as well up the East Coast. So yeah, you do find them on eucalypts too. And I don't know whether they have to be dead wood or whether they also grow on living wood, but they definitely do grow on dead wood. I'm not sure if they also grow on living wood.
Yeah, right. Do you know what sort of distribution they have? I know they're definitely in Victoria and here.
Yeah, I think like temperate, sort of like a lot of things in southeastern Australia, sort of temperate wet forests, or even not that wet forests, where I've shot them isn't particularly wet. It's just like a little bit wet. So I think, and they actually have 2 fruiting seasons throughout the year as well. So it's spring and autumn is when you tend to find them, around Easter time.
I didn't realize it.
Yeah, and I think the spring, I'm not sure about the spring season. It seems to be maybe a bit shorter. But that autumn's mushroom season anyway. So, they're around.
About now.
Probably around now. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Good timing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Seems to be a bit of Noctiluca around as well at the moment too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, with the have you been able to see any ghost fungi more recently, or I guess it's not something that you've been looking for?
Yeah, no, I don't tend to go out looking for them too much unless like I need to shoot some for work. Like I've spent sort of enough time hanging out in the bush covered in bugs that it's not something I really do for fun that much anymore. But if I come across them, like I'm always happy to come across them. But I just kind of like there you go. Someone said 7 Mile Beach pines. There you go. There's a hint to go and look out there.
Yeah.
So yeah. There's a few spots where I'll go and look for them if I need to find some. But they're not always there, and generally I'll find them somewhere else.
And in terms of the shooting, it would be pretty much the same kind of settings that you'd be using for the sea sparkle as well, the Noctiluca?
No, not at all. So it's time lapse. So the Noctiluca is all just video.
Right. With the video, then is that like 1/50th frame rate, or you have to drop that a bit?
So 25.
Okay.
Yeah, for video. And usually you'd go 1/50th with a playback of 25 frames a second, but you can take it down to 25 and still be okay. And that's because you want to get as much light into the camera as you can. Although it does burn out in some of those shots. It actually did overexpose in some of them. So there you go. So generally speaking, there is those differences between photography and video, and those sort of things you need to take into consideration when it comes to shutter speed. And in some respects, video gives you a little bit of motion blur doesn't matter so much, whereas you don't really want that when you're shooting time lapse photography. Particularly with quite long. Quite long bits between shots or whatever. Yeah.
It looked like you'd be going for like only a second or so, just so that you could still actually see otherwise the movement of the bugs would be really staggered.
Well, they actually don't move very much because they're
Okay.
feeding. So, I mean, you see the slugs, they're probably the fastest moving things on there, and they don't move very fast. So, yeah, it really, I can't remember. I think I was setting up my shots for about an hour for each of those clips.
Wow.
So,
Oh, that long.
yeah. So it's funny. Like that spot kind of got discovered on social media quite quickly after I started shooting there. So the first couple of nights I had it all to myself, which was great. And I don't mind that at all. It's always nice to have someone to talk to as well. If people want to hang out and chat, that's great.
Until they put the head torch on.
Yeah, but you just make sure you sort of plan for that a little bit. And I feel like it's kind of selfish as well to sort of be there hogging the thing for, hours and hours and hours and hours, like all night. Other people want to have a look at it as well and take their own photos. And generally, they just want to go and take a couple and then they'll leave. And, it just means I have to start later generally because people have to go to bed at some time, between like sort of 3 a.m. and daylight is pretty good. Well, there's not many people around then.
Would you just take a bivvy or something, or like?
I just like lie out there and do
Bushman.
It's interesting talking about social media. Stuff that glows tends to just attract people, attracts insects, and it also attracts people. And I guess with the social media aspect, these places can get swamped pretty quickly. I mean, if we're talking in terms of the bioluminescence in the water, if someone posts that it's in a certain location, then you'll suddenly have the area swamped by people having a look when, maybe 500 meters down the road, there's perfectly good stuff to look at as well, but everyone goes to that one spot. And I guess it's the same with those ghost fungi. In fact, there was even just recently, I think last year, there was a post that someone put up that said that they had found a large ghost fungi in a certain area and had alerted people to where it was, and then they went back the next day and it had been destroyed. And there was some suggestion that it was a photographer that took some photos and then decided that no one else was going to take a photo following, which was a bit disappointing. But social media attracts all sorts, Fraser?
Yeah, that's crazy. I've never heard of anything like that. It's a bit of a shame to hear that, actually. I mean, I kind of think it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I use a lot of social media myself for this exact kind of stuff, like, for example, Ian, back to Noctiluca, Ian posting a thing on late at night. And I saw that and I wouldn't have known it was even happening if he hadn't have done that.
I guess the same with the lamprey eels.
Oh yeah, exactly right.
Lampreys, not lamprey eels.
Nick, I found a tiny little baby lamprey this big the other day in the World River up where you've just been. Yeah, like it was tiny. It was like that. It was clear, and I knew it was a lamprey because you could see the tiny little gill holes down its neck. So totally wild. Yeah, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was just for the listeners. I found a lamprey migration happening on the Nelson Bay River in the Tarkine, and I posted. I was just with my family in a camper van, and we came across it. It was absolutely mental, and I probably mentioned it on the show before, but I posted video of it on social media, and it got picked up by quite a few media outlets. But Fraser noticed it immediately and frantically contacted me and wanted to know if I thought they'd still be there in 6 hours' time, that it would take him to drive up there and start filming for himself. And I didn't know, but you did, Fraser. You came up and you were there, maybe a bit more than 6 hours, but that's how long it takes to drive from Hobart to Nelson Bay River anyway.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, it was I went up there 2 weekends in a row, and I managed to catch the end of it. I went looking for where they would end up as well, to sort of complete this sequence. You have the desperate sort of desperate climb up river to spawn, but the water had so much tannin in it, it would have been, and that you know, you don't know where in that river network or that creek network they were all headed to. So, you know, it's a pretty vast area to search. So I didn't have much luck with that, unfortunately.
We're a bit off topic, I suppose. But I suppose going from Wrigley big things in lampreys, that we should talk about some Wrigley small things in glowworms. And I noticed that our second guest, Associate Professor David Merritt, is with us. So we might bring him on. Luke, what do you reckon?
Yeah, that sounds great. Welcome, David, and thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, yeah, it's been really interesting listening in. Good.
Awesome.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hi, Fraser.
Welcome to Tassie. Yeah, good to have you back.
It's cold.
Yeah, you picked a fresh week. It's about to get a lot colder. In fact, we might have a chunk of snow by the weekend.
Yeah, I love it.
Fantastic. Did you want to just talk, Fraser, about your association with David and why you invited him on?
I met. Actually, I first contacted Dave. I was writing a story, I think, about the caves down south for 40 degrees south, and I contacted Dave for comment on that. And then I can't remember exactly why it was, but something didn't work out with it. And I remembered his research. And then when the Life That Glows thing happened, and we shot the Noctiluca, you know, I think Jonathan Eisling, who was there with me at the time, he sort of said, "Oh, you know what? There are other things that glow down here. Maybe we should try pitching some other things that glow." So I pitched the idea of doing glowworms to Ammonite, and they were keen. They had another glowworm shoot lined up, but it fell through. And so like the whole glowworm sequence suddenly kind of became our responsibility, which was really great. And I got back in touch with Dave and said, "Tell me about glowworms," because I don't know anything about them.
Well, actually, Fraser, you're one of the few people who's actually read my papers and been able to understand them, I think.
I don't know how much I understood. Like, maybe a bit of it,
yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a bit about glowworms, David, and what makes them special.
Yeah, they're really amazing creatures. I started working on them about 20 years ago, around 2000 or something, and we discovered new species in Australia. But I've always been fascinated by how they glow, why they glow, and one of the questions that sort of got me down into Tasmania was people had said that in caves where it's completely dark, they don't see daylight, that they just glow continuously. I'd been doing some experiments with bush glowworms from Queensland, where I'm from, and they, you know, they have a biological clock that dictates when they're going to glow. And I thought, well, what do they really just glow continuously in a cave, you know? And so I put a camera in a cave in the northern part of Tasmania was Maricopa, I think, and it was an old Nikon Coolpix, you know, one of those ones where you could rotate, really old camera. But it was good enough to get some digital imaging, you know, with batteries plugged into it, etc. And I just got this amazing outcome that the glowworms show this cycle of glowing. They're brightening and dimming on a 24-hour cycle, and they're most bright at about 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., which is a crazy result. I still can't give you a definitive answer why. But that made me think, well, that could be just a characteristic of that cave. So then I went into other caves and bought better equipment. But I hear you've been talking about equipment, and leaving digital SLRs in caves for a long period is a really risky process, right? Yeah. So I bought the cheapest Canon, you know, those EOS that going back to the early 2000s, and you know, they do the job. And I wasn't after aesthetics. I just wanted to get an idea of how bright they were and how many were glowing. So I'd leave the camera in there for, say, 2 days running on batteries. Sometimes I'd run it longer by going in and replacing batteries, time lapse, of course. And then I'd get all the images and I'd turn them into grayscale. And then I'd run them through this sort of freeware that does digital analysis, just counts points, basically, particle analysis, they call it, and also measures intensity in these grayscale images. And it reinforced the results from the other cave. Slightly, this is the same cave where Fraser was talking to you about, where the filming for Light on Earth was done. Big population of glowworms there, beautiful. And they were showing the same cycle. So then more questions came out. Well, as you get closer to the cave entrance where they're experiencing daylight, are they showing the same cycle? Because we know that daylight makes glowworms switch off. And so, I was able to do this series of shots from different locations, from the dark zone through the twilight zone to the cave mouth, and got some really, really interesting results. So it meant a lot of visits in the caves, and I had I never lost any cameras, but at one point I had a pretty expensive $1,000 climate station next to the camera, and it started raining when I was back in bed, and about an hour away from the cave, and I thought, this is really heavy rain, I don't want to lose that station. So I went into the cave on my own at night during a flood and managed to retrieve it, but it had been damaged. So, but the camera was okay. It was just the darn climate recorder, Yeah, so I've had some interesting experiences.
So is there a difference between, you observed this in Tasmanian caves where they were glowing continuously, sort of with different intensity. Is there a difference between the glowworms we have here in caves and the glowworms you have elsewhere in Australia in caves in that regard?
There are differences, actually. The local one around where I'm based in southeast Queensland, there's no known cave populations of that species. So it seems to, I call it a forest adapted one. There's just no limestone in that area, where you've got heaps of it around here. And they show a different response to light than the Tasmanian species, and also the New Zealand species. There's a huge tourism based around glowworms in New Zealand as well. And it acts or behaves in the same way as the Tasmanian one. I think they're closely related. So there are differences between these species, but if you picked up one of these adult glowworms, they're very hard to find because they only live for 3 days. It's a fly. And you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the different species unless you had a microscope and, or do molecular analysis or something like that. They're really, really similar, but we have found these behavioural differences, yeah.
Yeah, right. And apart from caves, I know here in Tasmania, they'll live in sort of dark, wet overhangs, sort of Mount Field National Park near Russell Falls. There's some, I know there's some up near a large waterfall in the Tarkine that you can see. So they're adapted to sort of dark holes as opposed to caves, but they'll live in both. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. They're very unusual. Like, people tend to think of rainforest, well, it's wet forest, the glowworm should be anywhere, but in fact, they have very specific sub-habitats in the rainforest. I can look at a Google Earth and look for rainforest, and I could make a prediction where you're likely to find them. It's where streams or waterfalls are incising, cutting into the substrate. So you've got gullies, overhangs. They're really, really sensitive to low humidity. They'll desiccate really, really quickly. Right. That's why they do so well in caves, because, it's a very high humidity environment constantly. So in the bush, any dry weather will just kill a whole population, So if you get a dry wind through, or a fire for that matter, they're gone. So it's only in very, very predictable, very wet environments that you find them. And, you get a bit of an eye for the types of environments to find them. I'm doing a study at the moment to look at the genetic differences between different populations in Tasmania, and I'd be keen to know if there are more bush populations that aren't widely known, because it'd be very interesting to get some molecular data from them,
And is it generally just the one species, or is there other species as well?
There's, like, throughout Australia and New Zealand, I think 9 species. And actually, we think we've just discovered a new species in New Zealand. But Tasmania has its own species. We've done the analysis and found that, like, an obvious first question was, is the bush glowworm different from the cave glowworm, But we did molecular and also, looking at morphological features, they call them. It's like counting the hairs on a fly's leg. And they're the same species, definitely, but they look a little bit different when they're outside the cave, but that's just due to their exposure to a different environment, more light. The larvae, the immatures that are actually the glowing ones, they're darker. They have more pigmentation in their cuticle when they grow up in a bush environment compared to a cave environment.
And is there is it known, what the purpose of the glow actually is?
It's really clever. They use it to attract food. So in caves, you find them reasonably near the entrance in a cave that's got a stream running into it. So that stream will bring freshwater invertebrates like immature insects, and they get washed in there, but they still come out as adults, and they're totally confused because they're in complete darkness. And so the glowworms take advantage of this, and they're creating a sparkling, starry sky that disorients them, and they fly up towards the light and they get caught. So the glowworms are feeding on insects that are coming into the cave. There might be some population cycling going on in the cave, but it seems that's not the main source. And in the bush, it's the same thing. It's mostly aquatic insects that seem to emerge at night and get confused by the glowworms, and they end up in their webs where the glowworms eat them, and they're pretty vicious. As Fraser can tell you, he's done some really good macro work of these guys feeding.
Yeah, they're quite. Yeah, they look like little aliens or something like that, don't they?
Yeah, they're pretty aggressive.
That's the shoot that you did in the lab, Fraser?
Yeah. So, and as Dave was, that's with the Queensland species. Like, I think they're a bit smaller than our local species. But as Dave was saying, because of the habitat requirements of the glowworms, we had to have this. Each glowworm, Dave made a little house for it out of clay, and they lived in there, and they constructed their webs like a tiny little hole, like. And then, they all lived in a fish tank with a lid on it. And each time we needed to shoot one, we'd take it out. And we had this crazy macro rig. I don't have any pictures of it. I should have taken some more. That was like about 5 maybe extension tubes, and then and then also a constant, like a bellows and a microscope objective. And then I can't remember what was the microscope, Dave. I can't remember what the magnification on it was.
Yeah, we used a few different things, but pretty powerful.
And then we had we got a little bit of fiber optic, and we taped it to the end like a little, like the Lauer scope.
The probe lens.
Yeah.
So that's it was kind of like a hacked together version of that, pretty much, with a little light in the end of it. And the interesting thing is that you're filling the frame with something that has like a pinhead sort of size head, and you've got to get a shot of this thing like biting something else. And it's moving around and attacking it, and you have a very, very shallow depth of field. So this was for a show called, it was from Newtopia, One Strange Rock, and it was a huge budget National Geographic show, like massive. I think it was at the time the biggest natural history show that I think National Geographic had done, and it was had Will Smith as the narrator. Wow. and they shot on the International Space Station, so it gives you an idea of the kind of budget that they had. So I went up to Dave's place up in Queensland, his lab, for a week, and sat in there with these glowworms and this weird macro contraption, and we had the glowworms, because moving a camera like that creates a lot of shake, and we found it was impossible to follow a glowworm through its web. So Dave had a micro manipulator, which is like a little stage, probably about this big. And we'd put each glowworm on that. And then as the glowworm moved around, I'd twiddle the knobs which moved the X and Y axis and Z axis, trying to follow this, like this all day, trying to follow this glowworm around in its web. And we did a few other things. We put them on slides. We put them in capillary tubes to that was good. I don't know if they used any of that stuff. The capillary. I know they used the slides to try and mimic, to look like you're getting a shot straight down the web. Oh, down. So they slide around little hammocks. I don't know, Dave. You can explain how they move around because it's quite weird.
Yeah. They secrete. They call it a mucus tube. So they're not actually sitting up against the rock or the mud where they make their snares. First thing they do, if you move them and put them in a strange place, is they make silk and they suspend a hammock that they're secreting from all these glands in their body. So they're actually living inside this sort of mucousy, sticky tube that they produce. And then they hang the fishing lines down, and they're silk, but about half a millimetre apart, they sort of spit out a goblet of sticky mucus onto the silk. So you've got these long silk lines that are covered with mucus droplets, and they look quite beautiful, and that's what traps anything. And they're really clever. They'll hang something like 100 of these lines down, and in a cave where it's still, the lines can be up to 1 metre long, especially over in New Zealand, which is the biggest glowworms. And the flying insects get stuck.
Might have 100 lines. I was trying to figure out, because I've seen so many lines, and it's hard to figure out how many creatures are actually creating them. So it's one critter, and they know. If you tug, I did this in an experiment, if you tug just one line or vibrate it, they immediately go to that line. So it's as if they know their web, like a spider, but more three-dimensional. And they're really clever, and they just start hauling that line up, and they grab that critter, they really go down and bite, and they start chewing on it straight away. So they're pretty aggressive little fellas. They're knocking around.
Yeah. We spent a few days firing frozen Drosophila into their webs.
And I remember that shot too, Fraser. They specified a type of insect they wanted it to be feeding on, because I think it matched some of the footage they had. And we spent days looking for these darn insects, and it just shows you can waste time just trying to, not film the critter that they wanted you to film.
But just to, on a point with natural history filmmaking, so these guys actually shot this over in New Zealand, and they wanted this one. All they needed was the shot of the glowworm making the kill. And so, there's always this kind of ethical dilemma, particularly with this kind of predatory behavior, and questions about, like why are you doing it, and is it worth it? Like if we were to say, we're shooting a lion kill, could say, is it ethical to send a gazelle out into like a pride of lions when you know what's going to happen, particularly if it's not in a wild situation. Now, it's always a bit of a tricky one. There is some behavior that's impossible to get, in any kind of way. And obviously sending a gazelle into a captive pride of lions is a really, really terrible thing to do. But you could say the same, you could like look at the firing a frozen Drosophila fly into some glowworms as a similar kind of thing. And I guess in many ways it probably is. I guess what I'd say is that, we're talking about a sort of experimental situation where you sort of have glowworms being, sort of undergoing various different experiments and things anyway. And the Drosophila flies are sort of famously, the fruit flies that they use for scientific experimentation. So and also being an invertebrate, it's like there's a difference there, I think. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? It's something I'm always interested in discussing and thinking about, sort of the ethics of what we're doing and whether it is ethical, whether it isn't, particularly in this kind of situation.
I guess it'd be incredibly hard to actually get that kind of footage in a cave and try and work out.
I've tried.
Just to see it happen naturally. So I guess there's probably a scientific aspect to it as well, in terms of seeing the movement and understanding, precisely how they move through and capture that. And so I think it's not like you're doing it for fun. There's a bigger purpose to it. So but one thing I'm actually really interested in, and we haven't touched on, is actually the human impact in terms of damaging glowworm colonies and that kind of thing. And I'm really interested, David, just in terms of is there, how can you responsibly see glowworms, and how significant is light exposure and that kind of thing when it's sort of not a good idea?
Yeah. There's a number of sites where there's glowworm tourism, and everyone I've been to manages it very well. As I mentioned, when glowworms are exposed to light, they'll switch their own lights off. So if you go into a glowworm cave with a regular headlight on and you look around enough, you'll cause them to dim. But I know in caves that I've set up my gear in, occasionally cavers do come in, and I can tell from looking at my footage, they've got really bright lights, and the glowworms dim, but they come back again pretty quickly. So over the scale of a year, a season, or whatever, I don't think that's going to make much difference. But sites where there's continuous visitation, I think you need to put in place mechanisms. One is like at Waitomo Glowworm Cave, where they get something, they pre-COVID, they got 500,000 visitors a year to see glowworms. They insist on quietness, and obviously there are no lights in the glowworm chamber. But in other places, for visitors' safety, you have to have some lighting. But what we've discovered is that, and like most insects, the glowworms don't see red light. So they have to see the light to respond to it, to switch their own light off. And so if you use a red light, it's really convenient. And doing filming, we found it really useful, because the last thing you want to do is be setting up your camera with your light on bright so you can see, and then you look up and the glowworm switched off. So we use red light, and it also means you stay dark adapted, so you can see them much more readily when you do switch your light off. So red light is really useful, and that's a recommendation at many tourism sites. If people do need to take torches in, that they cover them. But I've found through the years that the sort of people who want to go into the bush at night, or they want to venture into a cave to see this sort of thing, they're not the sort of people who are going to be doing much destructive stuff. I've seen very, very few examples of people sort of purposefully damaging the insects. There's a place called Natural Bridge in southeast Queensland. It's rainforest, and it's like a cavern, I guess you'd call it, an overhang, dense colony on the ceiling. And I was there watching the glowworms with my light turned off, and I saw this dude, a really tall guy, just reach up and flick one off the ceiling. And I was thinking, why the hell did you do that? If everybody does that, there'll be nothing there to see in a few years. So there's the odd person who's not doing things right, but there's a lot of care and a lot of concern with any tourism associated with glowworms. Like at Waitomo Glowworm Cave, we've set up a permanent time-lapse camera in the main glowworm chamber, and it's power over Ethernet. So the company that they contract to grab the images puts them up on the web, so I can be sitting in my office at the University of Queensland, and I can get onto my computer and have a look and see how the glowworms are going over in Waitomo. We've got to take into account the 3-hour or 2-hour time difference. But I can see what's happening there. It's crazy. It's really good. But that's the level of care that they want to take. They want to be able to monitor the glowworm population in relation to.
Do they put that publicly as well, or is that that's just?
No, they haven't made it public. At the actual cave itself, they will project that image on a screen, but it can be a little less than really exciting, because it's just a lot of little blue dots on the screen. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
So, but we read something into it, but the average tourist might want to go have the experience first, and then look at it and go, yeah, I can see the reason why you'd want to do that. That also allowed us to reinforce this cycling thing, because it's happening in Waitomo Cave as well. Really strong daily cycles.
I am aware of one location where there's a little. Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say Helensburgh.
Yes, Helensburgh railway tunnel. There's a glowworm population in there, and you will sometimes see photographers. They spin steel wool in there and things like that. And I think that's that's probably the one that comes to my mind when you see damage. But I think maybe lights is one thing, but still wool and sparks going everywhere is probably on another level. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know there are concerned locals that I think that cave has been, well, it's not a cave, it's a tunnel, has been closed off.
Yes, it is now, yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of community concern about that sort of thing going on. And I believe, like I have been told anecdotal stories about people setting off rockets, fireworks in caves and things like that, but sometimes you've got to have more or less sort of sacrificial colonies that you can't stop people going in there. And as long as they're not a threatened species, then most people don't do the wrong thing. And I think there's a lot more positives than negatives coming out of that rare bad behavior. And to be honest, I think glowworms are a little bit more sort of resilient than we often give them credit for. They can withstand floods, fires, all sorts of things. There were some bushfires in Victoria that went right over the top of a granite boulder cave that had a big glowworm population in it. And as soon as the cavers could get back into it, they went in and had a look and could see no detrimental effects at all of all the smoke that presumably went into the cave system.
Wow. Yes. I guess they've been around for a long, long time. So
that's right.
Yeah, longer than us.
Fraser, have you got some stuff to show us for glowworms?
Yeah, I do. I'll chuck it up. So this was shot by myself, Ian, and Jono again, and Dave was there as well, guiding us around and teaching us about the glowworms. And where's the share button gone? There is.
There moved it out the way.
Bright green one. Why? How am I missing that? So and it was Dave's research that sort of gave it. So I'll just go back to that and just explain that. So this is a shot that Ian kind of, I sort of spoke to Ian and said, right, we want to do this day to night transition in the cave. So there's a lot of, I think this is like a 4-stop HDR time lapse on a slider. So it was pretty hard to do. And the reason you need the 4 stops is because in the mouth of the cave, you're dealing with huge variations in light. So obviously that's quite hot outside there. But we only sort of needed it a little bit. But you've got the outside, which is very bright. It was really hot and sunny when we were there doing it. You've got these guys over here, this little colony, and the guys on the roof, which are completely drowned out if you correctly expose for outside. And then you've got the transition happening as well, so that all kind of shifts the other direction. So you can sort of see it go like that. And Ian had to build a computer especially to process those files.
Yeah. He's done an incredible job.
But these are all the other ones. You can see them in the caves. These close-ups. So these shots here are interesting as well. So these shots are actually time-lapse. The brief was that we needed to do it so it didn't look like there was any artificial light, and the glowworms essentially needed to light themselves. We originally tried all kinds of ways of subtly lighting them, and it just didn't work. Either the glowworms weren't happy with the situation or it just looked artificial. So what we ended up doing was taking a really fast time lapse, as fast as we could, while maintaining while letting the light from the glowworm sort of illuminate the area around them. So I think it was I think each shot was like maybe a second long, and then went straight into another shot. So it was like 1 second, 1 second, 1 second.
1 second frames, yeah.
Yeah, and so just one after the other, so without any gap in between. And then we slowed it down later on with frame blending. So using a program called Twixtor, which I don't think you really needed to do that with anymore. So it has this kind of strange, you can see something got wrong, or like a thing had fallen over in the night, or So yeah, but one of the most amazing experiences is being here I think about midnight or something like that is when they seem to be doing their thing the best. And you'd see just your eyes have become adjusted to it, all back down in the cave, like so much brighter than during the day, all out into the forest in the front, like really, really spectacular, like really amazing and kind of creepy as well, because you get these auditory hallucinations when you're sort of when you have your senses taken away from you like that, and the creek starts to sound like people talking, and it's pretty weird when you're there by yourself.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember talking to you about that, Fraser, and you looked a bit freaked out, and then you experienced it yourself. So I wasn't totally crazy.
I'm glad you warned me about it. Yeah, because I would have really thought someone was walking down the passage towards me or something.
Yeah, right. Is it because of all the echoing of the sound? Or?
Yeah. Oh, you go, Dave.
It's quite an active stream that sort of courses through there, and it's riffles and little waterfalls and so forth, and you get all these sort of auditory echo effects because of the different chambers, and I think that's what it is. You just hear these strange sounds in the cave.
It sounds the stream burble is about the same pitch as a human voice, so you can imagine a little stream bubbling away. There's like little high notes and there's sort of lower notes, and the high notes turn into, well, for me anyway, turn into like people laughing at a dinner party, like in another area of the cave, or glasses, and
it's so eerie.
Yeah. And it sounds, it is really freaky. I've spent a few nights there now where I'm, by myself and just, just hearing weird stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, I think we normally run the show to about 9 o'clock, so we're sort of right on time now. We're just a bit over. So look, I really wanted to thank you both for joining us tonight, and and David calling in to talk about his passion, I guess, in glowing insects. One thing I was going to actually ask before we do wrap up is, do you deal much with fireflies and that kind of thing as well?
Yeah. Fireflies are present in Australia, though they're sort of under-recognised. The rainforest sites I go to in the hinterland of the Gold Coast in Queensland, there are fireflies there, but they're really seasonal. They're only there for about 4 weeks of a year when they're mating. And so sometimes you can be in a gully that's got glowworms in it, and they're glowing this lovely sort of cyan colour, and then you'll have a streaking firefly going through, flashing this sort of green colour. It's really spectacular.
I remember, David, coming across some, I think is it Castle Rock and somewhere around Dorrigo National Park sort of area?
Yeah, they're around Dorrigo, yeah.
And it was just like being in fairyland. They were just landing in my hands and lighting up and flying away. I was like, oh my goodness, it's amazing.
Yeah, and in places like the US, they're present in much, much bigger numbers, and there's tourism based around them there as well. But in Australia, there's one person who works on fireflies, like scientifically, and she's like in her 80s or something like that, and is just continuing on in retirement. So there's so much we don't know about Australian fireflies. And there might even be some they're synchronous flashes, like they're famous, a couple of species in Southeast Asia that get into these mangrove trees. All the males accumulate and they flash synchronously. It's supposed to be very, very spectacular. It's it's on my bucket list. But there might be Australian species that do it as well. But it's just we've got such big open spaces, and people aren't getting out at night to tell us about all this stuff. But yeah, they're out there. They're really interesting.
There's a challenge for someone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen a few really awesome firefly shots coming out of I think New South Wales. So yeah, there's definitely a few people on the ball there. But
well, and the challenge photographically as well.
Definitely.
Very much. That's an area where the technology's going to help us. Obviously, they're moving pretty quickly, so you need to have that high ISO capability to shoot them.
Get your 7S. Are they? Is it Mark 2 or 3 they're up to now?
Oh, we're just up to the 7S 3 now. Yep.
3, yeah.
So there'd be other good cameras out there too. Just that Sony seems to be pretty good.
I think in general, the ISO capabilities of most cameras has improved in leaps and bounds since since the A7S1 came out.
Oh yeah, it's unreal now. So yeah, awesome. Well, look, thanks again, guys, for joining us. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I just so adore your work, Fraser. It's just always a joy to watch.
I love your work as well.
Get a room, guys. Get a room.
Yeah. We should probably mention before we wrap up, we've got a very, very exciting show next week, and it's our 50th show next week, so that's quite a milestone for us.
Congratulations
on
that.
So we're actually doing a Peter Dombrovskis special next week, called The Legacy of Peter Dombrovskis, and we have Chris Bell, Rob Blakers, Grant Dixon and Simon Olding joining us. So it's going to be an absolute.
We almost got Bob Brown, but he's away on the West Coast at the moment.
Yeah. So
he had a great relationship with Peter. And if you didn't know, Chris Bell had a very personal, intimate relationship with Peter as well.
Very close. So we've also had permission from Liz Dombrovskis, his widow, to be able to share his work, and Simon Olding, who's on the show, who's been on the show before, actually digitally remasters Peter's work to sell for print, under the I guess direction of Liz Dombrovskis. So it's really nice to be able to have that connection there as well, and we're very, very excited about that. We've been pretty much thinking about doing something like that since we started. So please tune in next week, and it's going to be an absolutely amazing episode. So we really can't wait.
I mean, for all of us, and I mean Nick probably even more than all of us together, I think is Peter's had a massive influence on landscape and conservation photography in this part of the world, and he's the only Australian photographer to make the International Hall of Fame ever, actually. And I don't know anyone in this kind of genre or realm who hasn't been influenced by his work, who's been around for a while at least. And to have people like Chris in particular, who knew Peter personally, and Rob, who was on campaigns with him at a similar sort of time in the 80s, and Grant with his own, knowledge, and Simon, who's actually taking a lot of responsibility for the legacy of Peter's work and the future of how it can be sort of preserved and presented and interacted with from now on. It's going to be a really beautifully holistic show, and Nick just wrote the most incredible introduction to the show this afternoon, which should really, really set the precedent for what it's going to be. It's going to be a very special night. David, thank you for your time in particular and your incredible expertise, and it was great sort of seeing the to and fro between the two of you guys, and just visualizing what it's actually like being. I was a caving guide for 17 years, so I know what a dirty sort of dusty, bizarre kind of space and cold space it is to spend time, particularly staying overnight. So and it's not a risk-free environment either. If something goes wrong, you're in the real pickle. So goodness knows, the commitment you show to do those HDR transition sort of time lapses. I don't think anybody's going to have any idea what that took until they actually tried it themselves. But I've got a rough idea. So, my proverbial hat off to you all for even attempting that. That's massive.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll leave it there, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you again next week. And thanks once again, Fraser and David, and have a good one. See you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.